Hello and welcome. My name is Derek Schreiner. I'm the designer and the writer of various gamebooks, including the Operation CanCon series and the Break System series of gamebooks. Today I'd like to teach you how to play the latest in the Break System series, which is the third in a trilogy called The Winter Mission. Now, I previously did a how to play video for the prior book in the series called The Fall Affair, and many of its games, Microgames, are similar to the ones that you'll find in the Winter Mission. So if you've seen that video, you're 90% of the way there. I am going to do another video for this book, however, because there is something additional that's been included, which is a sheet called the Winter Mission sheet, in which you do things like track your progress, track members of your crew, track your reputation, all things that are part and parcel of making the role-playing aspect of the game a little richer. And that will impact on the microgame slightly. So grab yourself some six-sided dice, something to write with, and a mug of your favorite fondue. And let's get started. Okay, so the first thing is that I'm going to assume you have everything that you need to play, that you have a copy of the book, The Winter Mission, that you have a sheet, we'll talk about this shortly, something to write with, and some dice. Now, I'm also going to assume that you already know the conventions behind a choose your own adventure, any kind of branching narrative, interactive fiction type experience where you go to a certain page or you have a choice and then you can choose between one page and another. And also that you're familiar with the concepts behind the Fall Affair, the microgames that use the dice. We'll look at that a little bit here, but that won't be the primary focus. In case you're interested in that, I do have a separate video for how to play the Fall Affair, which is the second title in the Break Gamebook trilogy. Here I'm going to focus primarily on what is new to the Winter Mission, what has been added since the Fall Affair, since the previous book. So, the first thing that you'll need to do is get a hold of this sheet, the Winter Mission sheet. Now, there are sort of references to how you can do so in the introduction of the book. It talks about having a copy of the Winter Mission sheet in the appendices, which is here. This is the appendices here, and the first thing in it is the sheet. I personally don't like writing in books, so feel free to copy this, however. And I also offer on my website, which is lockdownludnaut.com, I offer free PDFs for download, and it creates a sheet here. So if you've got old tired eyes like I do, or wear glasses, or just prefer having something larger, you can print this out and stretch it across a larger sheet. I like to put it in one of these plastic slips. I just use this for all my games. And then you can do things like write on it and then erase it again and use the sheet over and over again. So that's how you can get the sheet. Now, the first thing that's going to happen is that you will probably eventually reach one of the sections here where you will be given one of these instructions. I've talked about this in prior videos about how certain parts that are not narrative are instructions directly to the reader or the player in these rectangles. And this one is an early reference to the Winter Mission sheet saying, using a copy of that sheet, which is found in the appendices, complete both the name and the date in fields for this playthrough. So presumably you're using a new sheet, either when you first start the game or when you play subsequent replays, or you can just sort of continue adding on to the existing sheet that you're using if you play the game over and over again, and just fill in the sheet here with your name. So I'll do so here, and the date in, let's assume I've been playing for a while, and I'm just going to say yesterday, or whatever you want to put it in. Okay, so the next thing after name and date in that you will be concerned with is the idea of progress. That comes up a little bit later. And I'll mention that here. So you'll receive instructions. Again, you get this kind of gradually as you play through the book, as you read through the story. It incorporates learning the game itself into the narrative. So you will get an instruction like this one: using your current winter mission sheet, tick the first leftmost square in the Progress AM field. This is the Progress field here. This is the AM section, which represents everything you do in the morning of the story. Noon is sort of the big central pivot event, and then the afternoon is sort of the escape. So it wants you to tick the first square, which is the one on the left here, just to indicate that you've hit a certain point here. Various points, you'll be ticking off various squares here. It will tell you tick the noon square, or tick the second from the right in PM, and it will tell you why certain things may be dotted lines or why certain things are solid lines. And this basically just gives you a quick visual way to track how far through the story have you progressed. You know that when you finished a particularly important hub, you will check off your progress. You've gotten through that sort of challenge, and now you're on to the next one. Just sort of as a quick gauge. You will be told when to tick each subsequent square as you complete each stage. Okay. Now the next thing I'd like to talk about are the reputation points. So that's the next field that you see here. You won't do it all at once. In the story, it will first ask you for the name at one point and the date and the progress, and eventually you will reach a point when it talks about reputation points, which is abbreviated RP. So it will say, using your current copy of the winter mission sheet, ensure that the reputation points, or RP field, contains at least 2. That is the number 2. If this is your first time playing, write the 2 in the RP field. If you have played the winter mission before, do not add or subtract any points. Simply use the RP value from your prior playthrough, which should already be at least 2. It can be more than 2, but it will never be less than 2. And when you're starting fresh, it doesn't start from 0. You get a couple of points. And I don't want to go into too many spoilers, so some of this you'll have to take on faith. But you go through some events in the book where you meet people and you get a little bit of a reputation. So you start with a little something, and that sort of helps you. You make some contacts. And that's the idea of reputation. So reputation doesn't go below 2. If you make more reputation points, if you make more connections, then it can increase. If you hire crew and you have an ending, that can increase it as well, and we'll see more about that shortly. But you never lose reputation points. They only go up. Sometimes they will hold steady. For example, if you have 2 reputation points and you decide, I'm not going to hire any crew, and then you have an ending, you will not gain any reputation points. You didn't meet any new people, you didn't make any new connections or contacts, so it doesn't increase. It stays the same, it won't go down. But once you hire crew, even if you have a premature ending, if you don't finish the sort of so-called true path to the book, you can still earn additional reputation points. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is code words and continuing without crew. I'm going to assume sort of for this first example that we're playing solo, that is, that we're not playing with any crew. And we'll talk about how that changes when you do hire crew shortly. But the previous 2 books, for sort of narrative reasons, always came back to the idea that you were sort of a lone wolf, that you were playing alone, that you were playing solo, that you felt you worked better without other people interfering. It was just part of the story. And this book is sort of intending to point you in the direction of maybe you need help this time, so maybe you need to work with a crew. But it is possible to play the book, and it is possible to win it solo. It's just very, very unlikely. In fact, I calculate the odds at being about 1 in over 16,000, the chances that the first time you play that you will actually succeed alone. So you can see it's possible. It's just very, very difficult, and you're probably better off to get some crew. Anyway, let's assume that you're sort of going through and you're determined to play this on your own. Let's assume you get through a fair amount of the story. You're actually doing really well, and against all odds, you sort of get to the central point, and then you're around the middle here, and you encounter one of these microgames. Now these microgames, again, these are what I talked about in the previous how to play video for the fall affair, and I won't go into too many details about this. You can see that video for more details. But in this case, we see something that says on your current winter mission sheet in the progress noon field, tick the only available square which represents the pivotal noon stage. You've reached the goal, now you must escape. So we've just ticked the noon stage here. And you'll see a choice, and you'll see this at various places every time you successfully complete one of the stages. Before you continue, it will give you a choice between continuing the mission without, and then certain gobbledygook codes here, or continue the mission with these certain codes. And these codes will be different every time you see that choice. If the codes don't make any sense to you, if you haven't found these code words or no one has told you about these code words, if these code words are not written down on your sheet, and we'll talk a little bit more about where you would get these codes shortly. But if these don't make any sense to you, if you don't have these codes, if you don't know what these mean, or if you're just playing solo, then you would continue the mission without them. And you would, in this case, go to 129. But if you have encountered these codes, if you know what these codes mean, if you've encountered characters who have told you these codes or situations that have shared these codes, and you've written these codes down in their appropriate place on the sheet, if you have any of these codes, then you can go with the codes to a different section than the previous one. So instead of 129, in this case, you'd go to 139. So these are the kinds of things you'd see. But if you're playing solo, you don't want to play with a crew, you don't have codes, anything like that, you would just take the option that I don't have these codes without any of these codes, and you'd go to 129. So then you would follow through and you would go through all of these different things. And you would play some of these microgames. And I'm going to just show you some quick examples of these microgames, but I won't get into too many details about them. There's a section here early on, and again, I don't want to spoil too much, but you'll encounter a section which actually serves as a sort of training area for you to train various microgames. Not all the microgames, but the microgames that seem most likely to be useful on this mission. So terms like rotator, race car, level, noon, these may be familiar to you if you've read or played The Fall Affair. And you can practice these again. Just in case you didn't play that book, there are certain things that sort of catch you up and bring you up to speed on the story, and these will bring you up to speed on how to play the microgames. So that appears early on in the story. But at some point later on, it may be, if we got to the noon section, that we may encounter one of these games, these microgames. And here's one example here, which reads, roll a six-sided die 3 times and note the results in the order rolled. This is the lock code. Next, roll the die 6 more times. From these new results, choose any 3 numbers and arrange them in any order. This is your pick. If your pick matches the lock code, you succeed. Otherwise, you fail. And then depending on how you do in this game, you choose either the success option or the failure option and go to the corresponding pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in here, I have a little dice tray here that I can use, and some dice that I might be playing with. These are appropriately wintry dice, like the cover here, or use my little Swiss tray because we are setting the story in Switzerland. But whatever the case, let's try playing this game that you may have seen in the previous book. So we'll roll a 6-sided die 3 times and note the results in the order rolled. So let's just write this down here just for reference. 6 is the first thing, then 3, and then 3. So it's a very, very simple game, this microgame. It's just meant to be a quick simulation of picking a lock. So here we have the lock code is 633. Now what we're going to do is roll the die 6 more times and write down the results. 3, 6, so this is looking good. 1, 4, 2, oh, maybe not so good. 4. Okay. From these 6 numbers, can we form a pick with the same numbers that match the lock, which is 633? Well, we have the 6 here, and we have the 3 here, so we could make a 6 and a 3, but here we don't have another 3, which we need there. None of these match. We have a 1, a 4, a 2, and a 2. We don't have the right lock picks in order to pick this particular lock. So in this case, this would be a failure. And instead of the success option, we would go to the failure. You appear to fail in stopping the machine. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad ending or anything like that. It just means that we weren't able to pick this lock. It is possible sometimes when you succeed that bad things can still happen, and when you fail, good things might still happen. But in any case, this game has decided for us which way to go, and we go to 113. Okay, we're going to revisit this shortly, so don't panic if you're not having good luck. Let's assume that this was terrible and that this ended our game because we weren't able to pick this particular lock. We failed and we had a terrible ending. And so we're starting to think, maybe we need some crew. If we found an ending, let's see here. I'm just picking any ending here. You might come to an ending that says end, and then it gives you a couple of choices. Most of the endings do this. In fact, I think all of them do in this book. One of the options, even though the story has ended, you could just stop if you wanted, or you could go right back to the beginning and just read it all over again from the start. Or you get a couple of options here, just for your convenience. Do you want to return to the most recent microgame branch and try again? Go to 118. In which case, we might say, the game didn't work out. Let's go back to 118, play that game again, and see if we get a different result, and see what goes down the other path. Or another option is, let's not worry about that. Let's go further back and maybe hire some crew appropriate to this area. Maybe you've already done this before. Maybe you tried one way, it didn't work out for you in a way you liked. You went the other way, it didn't work out for you in a way that you liked. So maybe you've already done this, you tried this, and you want to say, you know what, I'm going to not hoard my points here. I'm not going to keep my 2 reputation points, my 2 RP. I'm going to try spending them on some crew appropriate to this area. So then you're sent to 221. And there's quite a number of endings. There's, I believe, 22 endings in this book. And many of them will suggest, if you're alone, that you go to section 221. So this is sort of a big area for a lot of the endings to give you help if your game ends prematurely. I'm going to read through this just so that we get the information across. There's a note when you first begin. If you've come to this section multiple times and you already understand these ideas, you can always skip down to the box marked Crew Hired, which is a couple of pages down here. There's not a lot of text, but when you've been here multiple times, you might want to just, yeah, I understand. Let me just skip ahead and go straight to the work of sort of figuring out who to hire. But in this case, I'm assuming we haven't become familiar with this already. And it reads, did your mission come to a premature end? Not a problem. It was designed that way deliberately to encourage building a team. It is technically possible, though statistically unlikely, to win the game without hiring a crew. By win, I mean reaching section 222. We're on 221, so it's a different section. It's referring to a different one, which is the true or canonical ending. However, in 7 of 11 total mission stages, crew members can help you to succeed. Hiring a crew will increase your odds dramatically. Generalists will allow you to re-roll dice in some stages. Specialists allow you to bypass randomness entirely, and we're going to look at those both shortly. In keeping with their abilities, different crew candidates have different job expectations. At the beginning of a playthrough, each generalist will work with a less established employer and only expects 2 RP, or reputation points, apiece. Alternatively, each specialist will only work with a more established employer, and they expect 3 RP apiece. However, at the end of a playthrough, generalists who work with more people and are thus more social reward you with more contacts, or 2 RP. Conversely, Specialists who work with fewer people and concentrate more on their craft connect you to fewer contacts, and they only earn you 1 RP. You can then use the RP earned at the end of a mission to hire more or more specialized crew members in a subsequent attempt. And here's an example to illustrate. Let's say you're playing a game with 6 reputation points. You could potentially hire 3 generalists. So if they cost 2 RP each, you could hire 3. 3 times 2 is 6. Or specialists who are more expensive, being 3 RP each, you could hire 2 of them with 6 RP. 2 specialists times a cost of 3 RP each is a total of 6 RP. You could also use less. You don't have to use the maximum, but you presumably might want to. Hypothetically, let's assume you hired 1 generalist and 1 specialist. So that's 1 person that costs 2 RP to hire, 1 that costs 3 RP to hire. That's 5 RP. And you're leaving 1 RP unused. You just want these 2 particular people, but there's no one left that you can afford for 1 RP. So you have 6 RP, you subtract 5 RP, and then that leaves you 1 RP. Now, when I say subtract, remember, and this is reminded about in a few different places, you don't lose reputation points. You only gain it or it stays the same. You're not losing it. It's not a matter of you need to spend it. It's more a matter of these people are looking for you to have a certain level of reputation. So to hire a generalist and a specialist, one of them expects you to be at least 2 in terms of reputation. One expects you to have 3 in reputation, so you need 5 altogether in reputation. But it doesn't mean you spend them and now you only have 1 left. It just means there's 1 that you're not making use of. If your game ends in any section other than 222, you earn an additional 2 RP from the generalist hired and 1 RP from a specialist hired for a new total of 9 RP. That's the original 6 RP plus 2 RP that's added from the generalist and 1 RP from the specialist. If you had multiple specialists or multiple generalists, they would also earn you more. So for example, if you had 2 generalists, you'd get 2 and 2. So the 2 generalists would earn you 4 RP. Or if you had 2 specialists, you would get 1 and 1 RP or 2 RP. Thus, on your subsequent attempt, you could use 9 RP, which is the 1, 3, and the 6 that you originally had, to hire 4 generalists, 3 specialists, or whatever other combination that fits. In short, generalists demand less, 2 RP, but they reward you with more, 2 RP. Specialists demand more, 3 RP, but they reward you with less, 1 RP. In any case, even a so-called unsuccessful ending still results in a windfall. Happy hiring, or should I say, recruiting. And then we come to the crew hired section here, where it talks about who the generalists are, where they're applicable, what they do. There's more detail about this with more flavor text in the story itself, but just to read here briefly. Generalists on your current winter mission sheet add 2 RP to your reputation points for each of the following generalists hired for the most recent mission. So if you had hired Eek the Fixer, Renner the Smuggler, Lil the Watcher, and Lana the Insider, you would get 2 RP each if you'd hired them all. Of course, it would take quite a bit to hire them. It would hiring all 4 would take 8 RP to start with. But if you had hired them all, you would add another 8 RP to your existing 8 RP, and now you'd have 16. But of course, it takes money to make money, as they say, so it takes RP to make RP. In terms of specialists, on your current winter mission sheet, add 1 RP to your reputation points for each of the following specialists hired for the most recent mission. So let's assume you had 12 RP to start with, and that's a lot of RP, and you were able to hire all 4 of these specialists. You hired Anna the Charmer, Gig the Driver, Bob the Enforcer, and Rotor the Cipher, who's kind of a code breaker. Then this would cost you 12, and all 4 of them would add 1 RP. So 1, 2, 3, 4 additional points, 4 added on to the original 12, would give you 16. So you would then have 16 RP. I mean, the truth is, with all 4 specialists on your team or all 4 generalists, the chances are very, very slim. They're decreasing, or maybe even impossible in the case of specialists, that you could fail the game. But this basically means that every time you have a premature ending and your game ends and you haven't gotten to section 222, it gives you a little bit of something to spend for the next go around, right? So if the game is sort of self-leveling and you find that it's quite difficult for you, it gives you something to spend and will make it easier the next time around. But maybe you didn't hire generalists or specialists. If you didn't hire a crew, like that thing we were talking about earlier where you wanted to play solo intentionally, keep your existing RP or 2 RP, whichever is higher. So if you had earned some RP earlier and you decided, I'm going to try it solo anyway, even though I now have 4 RP or something, you could still keep that 4 RP. It's not like you lose it. But consider hiring some crew if you found the game too difficult. But this is up to you, right? Some people like a game that is difficult or becomes more difficult as it goes. So this game allows you to play it with more difficulty if you want to. Or if you choose that you want to spend your RP, you're not forced to, but if you choose to, it can help you to make your game different or easier. Finally here, update your winter mission sheet as appropriate, or restart with a fresh copy. Remember, you can find the original in the appendix or online at lockdownludnaut.com. Then choose one of the following options to try the mission again. And then there's this whole selection of places. It basically gives you a little directory of, do you want to go straight to hiring a generalist? Go to this section. If you want to hire a specialist, go to this section. If you want to begin the mission right from the very beginning, go to this section. If you just want to get some background on the history of the previous books, go there. If you want to practice those activities, I showed you the training grounds earlier, you would go to this section. Or if you want to listen to the briefing about this mission, then you would go to a different section again. And you choose where to go. If you want crew, here's where you go to hire them. And then otherwise you can go to one of these sections. Not that you have to start and read all over from scratch again if you don't want to. Of course you can go right back to the very beginning. But this just gives you a little way to sort of jump ahead if you want to sort of get a head start on stuff. Okay, so let's assume we've just finished the game and we came to an early end and we decided, okay, we're going to hire some crew. The section where you hire crew comes here in section 28 in this case, and there's a little background story here, and a character will explain to you a lot of these things in a more story way about what is a generalist and what is a specialist. And then if you want to go to hire a generalist, you would go to this particular section. If you want to hire a specialist, you go there. You can hire both. You don't have to just hire one or the other, but you can only hire one at a time. So after you would hire the generalist, for example, and you went to 21 in this case, it would still give you the option when you're done doing whatever you do here, it would say, now you could also go to hire a specialist. And similarly, later on when you're in the later section and you're working with specialists here, it also gives you the option to jump back and hire a generalist, I should say. So you're not locked into one particular branch or the other. You can always go back and forth. It's just overwhelming if you hire everyone at the same time and then there's an entire page full of choices. Here it kind of narrows it down to, here are just the specialists and there are just the generalists, right? So let's say, for example, we wanted to work with Renner the Smuggler. Renner the Smuggler would sort of give us a little introduction. We would talk to them, get some background. You don't have to hire someone once you speak to them. Maybe you find like, ooh, I find that character kind of annoying, so maybe I don't want to work with them because maybe, I'll find interacting with them to be unpleasant. Maybe I'll go talk to someone else, consider another one. Or maybe you go, hey, I find them kind of fun, or they seem useful. I'm willing to spend some RP on them, so I'm going to try and negotiate to hire them. So whatever you decide, you go to the appropriate section, or you maybe change your mind. I don't want a generalist after all. I'm going to hire a specialist. Go there. Whenever you have hired someone, let's say you decide to hire Renner the Smuggler here, it sends you to a particular section, and then Renner will tell you their code word. And it will give you instructions all about this, and this basically is a distilled version of what I'm saying. like do not spend or lose your hiring points. They're just used as a filter, basically. Make sure that you have at least 2 for this person, and it will tell you what this person's code word is. And then what you do is you will write that person's code word when they tell you and they say, okay, it's agreed, we're hired, whatever. You can say, let's say I'm hiring one particular person, I may write their code here. Or if I have more reputation points, let's say I played another game and I now have 4 because I hired a generalist with 2. The game ended, I got another 2 points because of the generalist. Now I have a total of 4. So I'm going to hire a couple of generalists here. Maybe I hire this person, and maybe I hire this person, and I write their codes down when I do the little interview with them. I've spent my 4 points, 2 for Lana, let's say, and 2 for Eek. And I've written down their codes just for reference. Now I'm done. So what you'll do is when you are done, you go back to whatever section it tells you, in this case 21, and then it says, okay, I think I'm done. You can either start the mission without these particular code words, or you can start the mission with these code words. Are these code words one of these? No, it's not. So I wouldn't start it with any of these code words. I would start it without the code words. But sometimes if it has, let's say it says ABC, XYZ or whatever, then I would say, okay, I have those codes. I will go to the appropriate section. And that's how the code words work. And it sort of shows, okay, I've hired those people. They trust me. I can afford to pay them. They've trusted me with their code names. So I've written them down here. And now that will sort of steer you in the story. And so when you reach places that say, do you have this code word or do you have that particular code word? Then the book knows, essentially, the branches know, oh, you have this person, so now it's going to change the story around you. So let's say, for example, you were somewhere in the middle of the book, around the same place we were earlier, solo. Now it's saying, continue the mission without this code or with this code. Well, maybe this time now, if you hired a particular person that's useful in this area, you will have those codes now and you go down a different route, and it will show what that person does to address a particular challenge that you're facing there or solve a particular problem. Okay, so let's say, for example, we go to, what is this? I'm looking for 18 here. This is the practice area, but you will never find that you need a generalist or a specialist here. This is before you meet anyone, so this teaches you how the games work. But when you actually get out into the field, when you're actually doing the retrieval mission, you will find that things may look a little different than practice, as is often the case. Just because something worked in theory doesn't mean it works out in the field, right? So now, when you see the thing that you saw before, the game, roll a 6-sided die 3 times and note the results in the order rolled. Things will go a little differently. Let's assume that we have Eek or Lana, as that we've had, in fact, both of these people. Lana here and Eek here, we have both of them. So let's play this game here. We have a 6. Oh, history repeats itself. 6. 4. Nope, history does not repeat itself. And then 1. 4. So the lock code now is 644 this time down this branch. And now I'm going to roll 6 more times. We get a 1. We get a 1. 4, that's good. So maybe a 4. A 6, so looking good. We're going through our pack, we're looking through all our stuff, seeing if we have the right lock picks for this particular lock. Come on, 4. Hey, 4. Very good. So now we have a 6, a 4, and a 4, and this matches the lock code 644. Perfect. So we succeed. But what if we had not been so lucky before? Well, we're lucky this time, even if this didn't work. Let's say, for example, this last number was not a 4. Let's say it was, and then he rolls a 4 again. A 1, in which case we would have failed this. Well, at this stage, hiring Eek and or Lana lets you reroll 1 die per character. So the generalists give us a little bit of extra sway. So if it turns out that we had both of them, let's assume we have Lana and Eek, we could roll at least one more time, possibly 2 if we have them both, which we do. We have a 6, that's not helpful, and a 3, so it's not helpful. A generalist is not a guarantee of success. A generalist just gives you extra chances. Now, it turns out we were lucky on the first roll, but we might not have been. And if we'd had the generalists, we would have had a couple of extra chances. So instead of rolling 6 times, we could have rolled 7 or 8 times, depending on whether we had one or both of these generalists. But generalists are, as the name suggests, maybe less skilled than a professional. They're useful in more places, but their powers are more limited than a professional. The specialists are much more powerful, but their specialty narrows their focus into one location only. Now, when I say a particular location, like let's say someone is a driver and someone is sort of driving you to a location in the morning, it doesn't mean when I say one place, it doesn't mean they're only active in the morning and then you can't use them again at night. You can use them anywhere where there's driving, basically. So if you have a race car AM stage or a race car PM stage, you can use them again and again. What I mean is that the generalist might be useful in both race car and rotator, or it might be useful in different places more than the specialist, but slightly less powerful. Anyway, that's what happens when you play with a generalist. When you play with a specialist, it's completely different. You don't even get this mini game. When you have the code for the specialist, remember, you follow the particular path that has the specialist code. Maybe here we had a completely different experience where instead of spending 4, maybe what we did was not hire Lana and Eek. Maybe what we did was, actually this would still be 4, but maybe we hired Rotor, the cipher, and we hired his particular, code was maybe, let's say 1, 2, 3. And so we subtract 3 for hiring the professional, which leaves us with 1 RP left. Yes, we're fine. So we can afford to hire Rotor. Rotor gives us the code. When we enter this code, when it asks us, do you have the code 1, 2, 3? If so, proceed with the code. Okay, I'll do that. We would never even encounter this game at all in the first place, because the specialists allow us to bypass the randomness entirely. So in a way, they're more powerful, but they're also more focused, more expensive, and they earn you less reputation if the game ends prematurely. That is not at the true canonical ending. And that's the difference between playing the microgames solo with the generalist or with the specialist. So even with specialists and generalists, the game can still end prematurely. In that case, you would still do what we did earlier, which was go to 221, but we already understand what happens there, and we just skip straight down to crew hired. And now we look at what our experience was. If we hired Rotor, we would get 1 extra point. So in this case, what it means is we would take that 4 that we had in the first place. We used 3 of the 4 to hire Rotor. But because we ended prematurely with Rotor, who is a specialist, we can add another 1, so we now have 5 RP. So the other option might have been that we did what we said in the first place, which was we hired Lana and we hired Eek, and then we had them with their codes here, whatever they are. These are not the codes, I'm just making them up just to be thematic. But in that case, the 4 reputation we started the game with would have bought Lana for 2 and Eek for 2 for a total of 4, so that's great. But the game ended prematurely. Lana and Eek each give us back 2 reputation points, so it's like +2 +2, which gives us 8. So the next time we play the game, we'll have 8 reputation, and we can use that 8 to buy all kinds of stuff. We could buy all 4 generalists, for example. We could employ them all, hire them all for 2, 2, 2, and 2 for a total of 8. Or we could hire a couple of different, let's say we could hire a driver and maybe an enforcer, you know, not these ones, but these ones here are the specialists on the sort of four edges here, not in the corners. And then maybe that gives us 3 and 3 for a total of 6. From 8, we still have 2, so we could still hire a generalist. Let's say we cover a little bit of this. We've got this side quite strongly covered, so maybe we hire Eek the Fixer for another 2. So this person would cost us 3, this person would cost us 3, this person would cost us 2 for 8. So we could afford to do that, and then we will likely have an even more successful game next time. And if it turns out that we still lose, then at least the next time after that, we will get 2 reputation, 1 reputation, 1 reputation. So we would add 4 to the 8, which would then give us 12. And so on. So it kind of loops around, if you're familiar with video game concepts of roguelikes, or roguelites, I should say, then that's a similar concept here. In any case, I hope that was helpful, because that's the new stuff that comes to Winter Mission that builds on what you learned in the Fall Affair, and that's how to play the Winter Mission. Good luck, and happy icing. Well, I hope you found that helpful in learning how to play the Winter Mission. I realize that most of the microgames are similar to those in the Fall Affair, and that's by design. The games and the books are intended to build on each other so that they become more complex as you go, adding one little element to each subsequent book. And in this case, adding the Winter Mission sheet adds a little bit of complexity to the microgames, depending on whether you're playing a generalist, a specialist, or hiring no crew at all. In any case, if you have any further questions, please feel free to get in touch. Drop me a line, leave a message, and if you want to be kept up to date on this content and similar stuff for these game books, please subscribe to the channel. And until the next time, take care of yourself, and bye for now.